Hi, and welcome to another episode of Musings. I'm Amrita Ghosh, and I have with me a writer today that wrote a book about love in the time of pandemic. I have with me Siddhartha Gigoo, a Commonwealth Prize winning author. In 2015, he won the Commonwealth Short Story Prize Asia for his short story, The Umbrella Man. He has written three books of poetry, three novels, The Garden of Solitude, Meher, a love story, and The Lion of Kashmir, that was recently last year. A book of short stories, A Fistful of Earth and Other Stories, which was longlisted for the Frank O'Connor International Short Story Award. He has also co-edited two anthologies, namely A Long Dream of Home, The Persecution, Exodus, and Exile of Kashmiri Pandits, and Once We Had Everything, Literature in Exile. The short stories have been longlisted for Lauren Hemingway Short Story Prize, Royal Society of Literature's B.S. Pritchard Short Story Prize, and Shauna Fallon Short Story Prize. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly. Siddharth's short films, The Last Day and Goodbye Mayfly, have won several awards at international film festivals. His writings appear in various literary journals. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So I want to turn to this book that came out when we just started having the lockdown and the pandemic began in March and April 2020. And it is titled Love in the Time of Quarantine. The title, of course, um, weaves back to Marquez's famous Love in the Time of Cholera. Tell us why you chose the title reminiscent of Marquez's novel and why the focus on love particularly when so many of the voices in this particular collection um, are focused on griefs, uncertainty, and so on.
Thank you so much, Amrita, for having me. Uh, Let me tell you a story. This book, which you read, of course, and it's there on Amazon Kindle, it was not supposed to be. It was not supposed to happen. So last year, which is 2020, the beginning of 2020, uh, my novel, The Lion of Kashmir, came out, and I had thought of taking a break from writing. I thought of maybe not writing for a few months, which I typically do. Maybe search for a story, and I'd thought of just reading a few books. I had not thought that I would write. But what happened in January and February, when we started here in India hearing about the coronavirus, uh, I think most of us, first of all, we kind of dismissed it. We did not think that it would turn out to be the way it turned out to be. So we kind of, well, some of us were laughing, just a flu. All you got to do is wear a mask. In Delhi, particularly, we were used to wearing masks for so many years because of the air pollution, right? But then I think the situation evolved on a daily basis, right? And in March, we were hearing rumors of a possible nationwide shutdown. That's what we heard. That there might be a. When we heard those rumors, I mean, I, we thought it's something. How can a country shut down? Right? How can a country shut down because of a flu? Of course, it is infectious. We're hearing that it's not dangerous. Uh, but then the government made an announcement that we are going to go into a shutdown. I think that was March. We're going to shut down the country for 3 weeks, which means there's going to be curfew. You're not supposed to go out. Everything comes to a standstill. And and it happened. All right. Day one was strange. Or we were trying to make sense of the so-called our shutdown existence, a state of lockdown. Day two happened. They were still trying to make sense. I think some of us were sharing our thoughts on social media. Day three, I think week one passed. I just happened to one of those evenings of day seven. I've not stepped out at all. I think nobody stepped out. I happened to step out in my balcony. I scribbled something. I just wrote something. I mean, not a pen and paper. I just happened to write a note, and I thought I'll just tweet it, send out a tweet. I mean, it was just random. And then next morning, I happened to read it, and I kind of wrote the second sentence and the third sentence. So every day I would write a sentence each. I think day five, it started taking some kind of a shape of a story, a sentence a day. And then for some reason, I think that was, I was reminded of what my music guru had taught me. Now in writing, we write a lot. When we open a blank Word document, or we get a notebook and we start writing. My music guru had taught me just the sare gama pa. For months, he just taught me that. And and when he saw that I was kind of racing fast, I was kind of playing something which he had not taught me. He said, "Wait, just take a pause. You're not supposed to play anything beyond what I teach you. It is just the first note in the Indian Sargam, which is Sa." I said, "For how many hours will I play?" He said, "Not hours. You got to play for days and months together." So that memory came alive, and I kind of likened writing to music. Like if in music you're supposed to practice and you're just supposed to play one note to get it right, and you don't get it right ever. Music. Uh, so that thought came to me, and I decided I'll just write one sentence a day. I'll write it and kind of rewrite it, and let me get one sentence right. I mean, uh, then I stuck to the original sentence, and I wrote it in 10,000 different ways. Uh, Day 10, it was taking the shape of a story. I think everything took shape of a story. So I was seeing a story. I was imagining a story. Uh, and it was supposed to be a love story. Then what happened is that I think it was day 15. I stepped out for groceries, and I drove to a grocery store which is just uh, 10 minutes from my place, and I was stopped by the cops, the police patrol. They said that, "Why are you driving? It's a lockdown." I said, "I'm just stepping out for groceries." They said, "Why can't you walk?" I said, I'm supposed to get rice, which is a 10 kilo sack. So you can't. You seem to be a young man. You can't lift a 10 kilo. So they were questioning me. And they were right. They said, "Why are you driving it? So why does you can maybe go and call because the essential services, the grocery stores were open." Anyway, while returning, I saw this family of four. They were walking aimlessly. They looked like people who who worked as laborers on construction, maybe one of those housing societies which was being built. So there was this man, woman, and two kids and a dog. They were just walking, and I uh, just happened to then remember that they are the people who spent months, maybe years, uh, in our neighborhood. So their home was the pavement. They had built some kind of a small tent, and I think they were laborers. So, but they were walking. They were going. I don't know what they were going, and I regret not having stopped and asked them. They would not recognize me, but I. And then when I reached home, I heard. I read news about thousands and thousands of such people across India. who, because of the country is now in a state of shutdown, there's no public transportation, there's no buses, trains, there's absolutely nothing. I mean, there's nobody, not a soul is walking on the streets, right? Uh, most people, in fact, almost everybody is locked down in their homes. But what happens to those people who have no homes to go? What happens to those people? And here in India, I mean, everybody was told that, you should not step out. You quarantine yourself at home, isolation at home. While most of us, uh, the urban class, we would be locked up, but because we have internet, we would post about what is happening and taking things very lightly. But how do people who have no homes isolate them? Why do they isolate? And then the government, I think in many cities, and there are people who are originally, whose homes are in villages, as you know. They're from Uttar Pradesh and Bihar and Madhya Pradesh, maybe even Andhra Pradesh, but they've come to Delhi. They're working as laborers in construction sites. Why do they go? They can't even board buses and trains because nothing is. So they're going somewhere, and I imagined a family of four and a dog. And this family I knew because they were just, every time I would go to the market, I would see them. Never paid attention to them. I found myself in a very, very hollow state. So then I thought their story is as important as the story of two lovers who are separated and who are expressing themselves. They can't even meet now because of and Delhi is a place wherein the young people meet. They meet in cafes and restaurants and colleges, the college cafeterias and malls. I thought that is one story which needs to be told, about two lovers. But there is something happening at the back. What about these people? So, so I imagined and I would dream about this family and this little girl who's barely 8, and this boy, and they have nowhere to go. And finally, they are compelled to take shelter in a government-run quarantine facility, which is in a bad shape. It's just a temporary shelter, and that's what happens. The story unfolds there. But I felt very hollow while I was writing it because I was in a very privileged kind of space. Amrita. I mean, this here I was, we're all, uh, we all have food to eat, and we are pampered lot, we have money, and what happens? I wanted to relate to such people, but then, so how do I, what do I make of this? How do I kind of be part of their story? I didn't want them to be part of my story. I wanted myself to be part of their story, and it's not easy. And so I turned to some of the books I had read. I turned to Love in the Time of War, where something similar happened. But of course, there's cholera, and the world is going through a pandemic and epidemic. And there's one novel all of us have come to celebrate and love, and it's like. It's one novel you just read. It's a deathbed novel, and one is dying, you just need to go back to the film. So I borrowed that. I think it was, I thought maybe my tribute to Mark is, of course, one of my favorite writers. So, Love in the Time of Quarantine. That's how it happened. I'm sorry I gave you a long answer.
No, this is important. I actually want to go back to the beginning of the book and look at something very specific. And that's the epigraphs. And there are three in there. There's Marcus's famous lines from the mentioned book. And then there's T.S. Eliot. And then you also, I was really interested, there's also Edmund Spenser's Fairy Queen in there. And I'm quoting from the epigraph. But there is nothing lost that may be found if sought. And it's interesting for me as a literary critic, I constantly, immediately started thinking about why you would have Fairy Queen in there. What are the connections? What are you trying? So I'm going to ask the author here yourself, why did you choose Fairy Queen, these particular lines for the opening of the book?
Wow, you noticed that, Amrita. I mean, Very few people would notice what you notice. A very quick, for a variety of reasons. First of all, what a life! For there is nothing lost that may be found if sought. Very difficult line, but what a line! I think it's most people these days. I think apart from students of literature, I don't even know how many students of literature read Edmund Spenser. I mean, I uh, my dad taught me. My dad introduced me to English poetry when I was a kid. You know, he started with strangely he started with Chaucer and Edmund Spenser, and I didn't like reading either of the two poets. I mean, I found it very difficult. Uh, and sometimes with my father, I just jog his memory and remind him of the days when he taught me Chaucer. And he says, "Oh my God, don't even read Chaucer. Nobody reads Chaucer anymore, and Spenser for that matter." But I remember when I was a little boy, he taught me Coleridge and Shelley and Keats. I enjoyed John Keats a lot. I think English poetry. Uh, Sometimes there are days when we go back to English poetry and we just take refuge in. I mean, Ode to the Nightingale, Gresham, so much relevant even today. Uh, so what happened last year? I uh, took out a book of English poetry and it's titled The Parnassus. I don't know how many. It's an old edition. Parnassus. It contains the best of English poems. So I just took out and randomly I opened it. It has Spenser and Chaucer. Not whole of it. It has some excerpts from because this particular poem is long. It's an epic poem, and uh, I just stopped at this passage, which is conversation between a knight and a giant, and I found it bizarre. I mean, here in Delhi, and it's almost a surreal surrounding, going back to that era when and that language, and the context is this conversation. It's only later I realized that how relevant the poem is, the fairy poem, because it talks about virtue. It's an allegory for the time. And I read this again, and of course I struggle to understand. Uh, and I called my father and I asked him. I said, "What do you mean? Can you, as a professor of literature, would you be able to help me understand? Can we go back to the same classroom?" Of course, we were having a telephone chat. He said, "He said, are you crazy? I mean, who reads Spencer?" He said, "I can maybe a little bit help you with P.S. Eliot. I mean, but Spencer I've forgotten." I mean, and we joked about. But I somehow then I googled. I wanted to find out. There are a lot of forums I found of people talking about this particular line, how important it is and what it means. It means different things to so many meanings, and that maybe there is takes us back to the definition of loss. I mean, just because you might have lost something, uh, or you don't know if something went suddenly, doesn't mean that that particular thing is gone forever in this whole universe or from your life. Uh, but if it can be found by searching, then you will eventually search it. You just need to search for the thing with passion. You just need to leave everything we do and really know how to search for things which we think are lost. So I think one of those thoughts came to me. But then there is another way you read this, that is there something, do we really lose things? For instance, worldly possession. If I misplace a, a pen or my sunglasses, they are somewhere there. I never lose. I think the only uh, thing we ever lose is a perishable entity. But I mean, if you look at what constitutes a perishable entity beyond just the physical aspect of it, there is something. I think nothing ever gets lost or deleted from this universe. I think that's one another meaning, and I think it applies to love, Amrita. I think it applies to hope. We never lose love. We never lose a loved one just because we may not, just because we, I think what we lose is the ability or the insight to see. Just because I don't see my grandfather does not mean that uh, he's lost or he's not there. He must be there. I think just because my vision is limited does not mean that I have lost something. The flaw, the limitation is in me, not in the thing which is lost. I mean, some as kids we build sand castles, no, and then comes a wave and the sand castle is finished. I mean, it's just sand. The castle might be gone, but the sand is still there, and maybe the memory of that sand castle built years ago when we were just kids. I think that memory is still there, and I think comes a time that the sand castle becomes rare. So nothing is ever lost. So I read this line hundreds of times. Even now, sometimes I think I quote it when I talk to friends. I've done it with you also. I think it's a very important line in our life. There's certain lines, Amrita, we just need to maybe understand them and uh, maybe we'll feel happy or maybe we'll feel, uh, maybe one of the mysteries is kind of, unfolding or maybe leading us into another mystery, some kind of a purpose. So I thought this epigraph. I would love to have this epigraph. I mean, just for people, if they don't want to read the book, would at least read this line. And of course, there's another one with T.S. Eliot, which is another favorite. And Eliot is like the rock star of all poets, right? I mean, we don't understand the wasteland, but we quote wasteland, in the
Would you read
past.
the lines by Eliot for us and tell us why you chose that?
Uh, yeah, it was. It's from the I wanted to. There was another. I wanted to uh, quote from the Wasteland, the last bit of Wasteland, because I don't know. I'm always fascinated by because those construct is used. He's ended it with Upanishadic thought.
Yes.
Uh, so I think while I was doing that, a thought came to me: Can I just have a book of epigraphs? And it happened. I thought, let me just a book of quotations. I was not looking at publishing, Amrita. I think this was lockdown. I had nothing to do. I thought I would take a break, but I didn't. And I thought, no, I think I should read and write. I mean, uh, because none of us were going out. So I was reading and I was marveling at some of the poetry. I was reading Lorca and I was reading Urdu poetry. I was listening to music, but somehow I I'd lost touch with English poetry, and I kind of read and reread the Wasteland, and suddenly there were these moments wherein it's making sense. Can you imagine it's making sense? And uh, I could hear the music, and then I thought that I wanted to kind of so I typed out the whole poem and I put it in my manuscript and I thought it's my book, it's my thing, and I as well compile all my favorite quotes from different books and sayings. Even Marquez, the symptoms of love are the same as that of cholera. It's true. You feel the burning sensation and things like that. But little did we know last year, April, that things would get worse globally, especially in India. We had no clue what happened. I mean, I would never occur to me in the wildest imagination that we'd be looking at, like death masquerade. I mean, life masquerading as death, and just knocking at our doors. This happened this April, with, uh, uh, but when I felt low, depressed, I think I sought refuge in English poetry. I don't know what happened, but I still do.
I'm going to For the sake of our viewers, I'm going to read the lines that you chose from, Elliot. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time through the unknown, remembered gate. Absolutely incredible.
So this is what I want to show you. Can you see this? So this is a very old edition of T.S. Eliot. Uh, this one. It's yeah. What is it? Look at the price. I don't know whether you can see. 45 paise, which is not even 50 paise. I think it's some 1960s or some. No, sorry, 1970s.
Is it
Not even a
1970?
rupee.
Is it
Yeah,
1970 publication?
yeah, 90. Yeah, 1970s. Yeah, just let me. I mean, yeah, of course, because uh, when did T.S. Eliot? Yeah, this is a British edition, Faber and Faber,
Paper and paper.
and it has, and it's as good as new. And I kind of, picked it up last year and I was reading, and it has the notes. Uh, uh, yeah, proof of. Imagine reading proof of lockdown. Let's go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient deep dive upon a table. Let's go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreat. So this is all I read, and I was like, this little, like a student in a literature class. I badly missed that. I even now, I think I have joked with you several times, but I still I'm looking for an opportunity to walk into a physical class wherein a professor, somebody like you, is teaching maybe Shakespeare or maybe Beckett or Beckett, of course. I think more than Shakespeare, I would love to sit in a waiting for Godot class.
So relevant for
And
our
just to,
times also. Waiting for Gojo.
yeah, I would love to do that. Is there something like an online class you can admit where everybody is talking about? I mean, I would love to do that. So I did that on the time. Like,
But
you
I
know,
think this is a good moment where I want to, and I do want to go back to the collection, but because we are talking about art and literature. So, what has been the role of arts and literature, even music, which is a great important part for you? I know that during these unprecedented times like this, not just for documenting what has been occurring around us, um, but perhaps I'm interested in what has been the role of arts and literature during this time when people's lives have been changed in really drastic ways, whether professionally or in the everyday.
yeah, it's a very difficult question, and I have always wondered, as a writer, a student of writing and literature, uh, why do I write? What is it about writing that excites me, or this urge to kind of tell stories, uh, write. Uh, Andrei Tarkovsky says he was also asked this question, and he has a beautiful response. He has a beautiful answer. He says, before you ask this question, we must ask ourselves a more important and pressing question: what is our purpose in this universe? We come, and how do we define our purpose? I mean, do we define our purpose, or we just lead a purposeless life? Then, and he says that if the purpose is to uh, if the purpose is to uh, experience things and experience magical things, experience life in its truest form, then then art is a means to do that. So whether it's writing or painting or dancing or music or maybe sports. I mean, Swami Vivekananda says God is in the football field. I mean, that's the purpose. You want to experience that magic, that thrill, wherein a person, one feels alive. One feels alive, even in the most desperate of situations. Uh, even when when faced with life and death situation. I think that's what happened last year.
And this year.
Many of us went through terrible times. I mean, we were so unsure of even existing the next day, and we have just exited that horrifying phase. Uh, you faced it, Amrita. I
Absolutely.
also faced it. Yeah. So when faced with such a test, which is a test, you don't know whether you're going to live or die. You don't know what to do. Do we give up hope? What do we do? How do we live? I think this is a question which I ask myself every day. Every day I think there is an answer. Every day I think there is a new insight. You talk to friends and family, you talk to colleagues, you talk to strangers, you talk to people who have really lost, who have seen devastation, and but they still have the will to live. I think this is education. And you talk to people who have no fear of death and they risk everything and they go out there and help others in a situation wherein they might get infected and they might die and they might carry this, but they have no fear. They take, of course, precaution. I think that is education. How do we, what do we do? How do we live better? I think that's the thing. In some cases, I think we narrate stories, we write letters. Those letters carry hope. Those letters carry. You wrote a beautiful uh, personal memoir. You captured what happened to you, and you wanted others to read it. I think it's very important what you do because others should read what happened. And this is, uh, I think, this is what I also try to do when I write. Uh, uh, Whether we really experience uh, everything that ought to be experienced. We don't know whether our lives are enriched, whether our horizons are broadened, whether we feel that the divinity within us. Maybe we have moments of peace and tranquility. I think there are maybe all sorts of situations. There are times we feel satisfied, we feel annoyed, we feel devastated, we feel still. I think everything happens to us. I think it depends on. I mean, if we keep our ears and eyes and if we keep our hearts open, you will done. I think that's what happened, Amrita. Uh, but what the pandemic taught us is that one should just relish, enjoy life. There's no point in, absolutely no merit in being narrow-minded. There's no merit in being self-centered. There's no merit in waking up in the morning and just thinking about oneself. I think there is more to life than just me and mine. That's what I think I'm learning, Amrita.
I want to go back to the collection itself because for me, it was this voice of the others that I see. And you talked about initially in this episode the shutdown existence that all of us experienced in give or take different ways, but we did. Um, and also this blow by blow capturing of day one, day two in the collection, and I highly encourage viewers to read it. Um, there is this capturing of the stasis, but it is also, as you mentioned, interspersed with these short narrative poems that are highlighting this family. And you talked about the family. Um, and there's a conversation between the child and the father that sort of revolves around the notion of home, shelter, uncertainties, loss. And they're very acutely vivid in these poems. Also, you talked about the migrant workers and the exile. Um, and then you talk about, and this is a larger question, but you, after these interspersing poems, there is this afterword where you talk about, and I'm quoting you here, we are all refugees. It instantly reminded me of Mohsin Hamid's famous lines in his one of his recent texts. We are all refugees from our childhoods. And this collection, it's so richly intertextual in so many ways. Um, so I wanted to know from you, of course, there's this emphasis on marginalized voices, a commentary on what was happening around us. But what was your larger aim in focusing on the refugees to represent the voices from the periphery in the quarantine and to connect it to we are all refugees?
Uh, because what happened to me as a 16-year-old and my family when I was growing up in Kashmir and we got displaced, we were in fact forced out of Kashmir, our own home. I think that I still carry that burden of history, that burden of persecution of having uh, lost uh, a home and homeland. Uh, for all these years, there are moments, there are times I still think about what we lost and kind of making sense of what it means for a generation to 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 live with that burden. And then as I said earlier, I wanted to be part of the story of uh, these four, this five, mother, father, two kids, and a dog, who whose home for years was just that shanty near the pavement. You know, I've always imagined that shanty. How much it be inside? You know, they have this small place where the woman lights the fire in the evening and she makes rotis and she makes food, and the little girl selling balloons at the traffic signal, and the boy running after a dog. Somehow there were moments when I actually imagined them as a happy family. And I was not sure whether they're really happy family or whether they're really bothered about happiness and sadness. Or maybe they're bothered about survival. Or maybe they're bothered about making a living. That they've left their home in a village somewhere maybe in UP, Uttar Pradesh or Bihar. I don't know that. I've never cared to know, which is also a terrible thing. And then I imagine them in a certain way. But I went back. The memory of my own camp days, Amrita, came alive for some reason. When when I and my sister and I, we were in a makeshift camp in Jammu for many months, and without a home. There was hardly anything. There were days where there was no food as well. There was no water. So that memory came alive. There are days when that memory comes alive, and I kind of have to deal with that. Uh, Now here, 30 years hence, I'm in a privileged position, place. There is an apartment, there is home, there is a sense of belonging. There is sometimes a sense of alienation as well when it comes to memory and your own past and history. So how do I deal with all these things? I sometimes feel that this leads to some kind of a conflict. And then when you talk to elders from your generation who have really lost their houses and homes because they built those houses and homes. I did not build my ancestral house and home. That was uh, built by my maybe great grandfather and then my grandfather. My father renovated it, spent a fortune, a lifetime of saving, renovating it, then got displaced. Uh, so, what is home? Is home a physical space? I don't know. Maybe it is. Of course, that is important. There is a physical space. Uh, but then, what if there are people who who are so evolved and mature, Amrita, that home becomes everywhere. And there are a lot of people who get to travel. They're hardly settled in one city. So they carry their home. Maybe they are business travelers. A friend of mine who used to travel so much that he would say, "My home, Siddharth, is this uh, small bag. That's my home." So what is home? I mean, it's it's a philosophical question, sociological question, psychological question. I've always been fascinated, but I was more interested in what the family lost because that was of immediate interest to me. Because I saw that image, I saw them while returning from a grocery store, and I did not bother to stop, and I did not bother to, for some reason that I still regret. I don't see them anymore. It's been almost a year. Uh, but they were part of my everyday drive to the metro station because they were always there. And upon return, they were always there. Ah, so they lost one home and they lost another home, which was just a small shanty or this tent, which was, of course, a temporary home. But what is home to them? What is home? They don't have any permanent thing. I mean, they don't even have a passport. What about such people? And there are thousands of such people. I would love to go and spend some time with such people and ask them this question. What is home for you? It's only then, Amrita, I feel that my own definition of home and the sense of displacement and alienation and the belonging will become refined, maybe more enriched definition. And maybe it'll become more complete. Unless I do that, it's still uh, a kind of a rickety ground, Amrita.
As we end today, I want to not focus on the ending because perhaps they are not important, but I want to include a surprise if you allow. I know music is a really important part of your journey as a writer, as an artist. And if you can play for us something, Siddharth Gigoo is a flautist. So select something that you would like to play for us. Tell us why you want to play this piece for us as we leave this episode.
Sure, I will play something which I have been practicing for some time now. Still far from, I'm not gotten it right, so it's a small piece, rag bihag. I don't know whether you've heard. It's a beautiful rag. I keep on going back to this rag. And the maestros, the gurus, vocalists, or even the instrumentalists play it so well. It's one of the most beautiful ragas in the Hindustani classical. And last few days, I have just been listening to Rag Bihag. I don't know why. It's a late night raga, uh, going by the theory and the musicologist. So I just play something. Let me see how
Please,
it
we would
sounds.
be delighted.
Okay. And so I have this bamboo flute. I'm not sure the sound, the quality of the sound because I am on a headset. So uh, I will start the Tanpura. So I will let me just tell me if you can hear something.
Yes, it's audible.
It's not too loud. Not too. Is
It's
it all
fine.
right?
Yes, it is
It's fine.
fine.
Okay. Another sound check. Let me see. So maybe 3, 4, 5 minutes. I don't know. I'll try and play something.
Please, absolutely.